Welcome to the Lit Mom Podcast, your go-to source for bite-sized literacy tips and tricks. Join me as we explore evidence-based strategies, techniques, and resources that promote strong reading and writing skill development. Get ready to empower your family with the knowledge and tools to navigate the world of structured literacy and unlock limitless potential. Welcome to the third episode of the Lit Mom Podcast, where we explore the wonderful world of literacy and how families like yours can support your child in the development of their reading and writing skills. Today, we are going to focus on the alphabetic principle and how your family can support your child in developing their alphabetic knowledge at home. I'm your host, Deb, and I'm so excited that you're here for our third episode. As always, I would like to first acknowledge the traditional territory in which I reside. My family and I reside on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, which includes the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi nations, also known as the Three Fires Confederacy. To kickstart our third episode, I would like to share two terms with you today that I think are important to be aware of, especially when we look at the new Ontario language curriculum. These two terms are embedded within the expectations. Your child may also hear these terms in the classroom and have an understanding of what they mean, and you may come across them again during progress reports or report cards. So I think it's just helpful to have this information. The first term I would like to share with you is phoneme, and a phoneme is the smallest unit of spoken language that distinguishes one word from another and is the physical act of how we articulate that sound. On the flip side, a grapheme is going to be the letter or combination of letters that we use to spell that sound. So the way that I think about it is phonemes are the sound that letters spell, and graphemes are letters. However, the reason that we use these terms in the classroom, and I did use these terms in kindergarten and grade 1, and the kiddos had a good understanding of what I was talking about after repetition, and it was easy to understand, is that sometimes more than one letter is going to be paired together to make a single sound. So I might have a digraph, the S and H are going to be paired together to spell sh. So I want for them to be able to associate different graphemes, letters, and letter pairs together for one sound. So those are the two terms that I think are helpful to understand and know. Phoneme, smallest unit of spoken language, and a grapheme, which is the letter or letter combinations that are going to spell the phoneme or the sound. All right, now let's talk about the key concepts for today's episode. Both alphabetic principle and alphabetic knowledge are foundational concepts when we talk about the early literacy development, particularly when we're talking about children learning how to read and write a specific alphabetic writing system like English. The alphabetic principle means that in written language, the letters or graphemes are going to represent specific sounds or phonemes, and those can form words. This is really important for children to understand when they're beginning to learn how to decode and uncode so that they are able to read and write effectively. Alphabetic knowledge, also known as letter sound knowledge, letter sound correspondence, is a foundational aspect of early literacy development. It refers to a child's ability to recognize and understand that there is a relationship between letters and their corresponding sounds. It also means that children have an understanding of letter names and the corresponding sounds linked to them. Now, it might not be surprising to know that many children come to school with the ability to say the alphabet or sing the alphabet. It is almost like a rite of passage for family members and parents that we teach our children the alphabet song. I just want to make sure that we are aware and that we can note that singing an alphabet song and having our children memorize and say the alphabet in a specific sequence is not the same thing as truly understanding or knowing letters. So when children are learning to read, or when they are reading, they have to be able to quickly identify printed letter forms and have the connections or the alphabetic knowledge to know that there are going to be certain letters and letter pairs that spell specific sounds. So it's something to be mindful of when we're talking about building alphabetic knowledge at home. We want to give children the exposure to letter names, the sounds that letters or letter pairs spell, as well as work on letter formation, because letter formation is tied in through writing, but it is a really great way for children to learn and better understand letters of the alphabet, pairs of letters in combination with sounds that they spell. From a research standpoint, studies have consistently shown that having a strong grasp of the alphabetic principle is a crucial predictor of future reading success. Research also indicates that children that have a strong alphabetic knowledge early on have a more substantial foundation for reading comprehension and overall language development. It is said to be one of the biggest predictors or strongest predictors of reading success or achievement in reading. Now, this is going to be both knowing letter name knowledge and letter sound knowledge. So both alphabetic principle and alphabetic knowledge are crucial in the early stages of learning to read and write. They're the beginning building blocks of phonemic awareness, which we'll touch on next episode, word recognition, and spelling, which are essential skills for successful literacy development. As children become successful and proficient in these principles, they are going to be able to apply them to reading and writing and gradually become more fluent and skilled in this area. At this point of the podcast, you might be saying, okay, Dev, what do we teach first, letter names or sounds? And research shows that we want to teach them both at the same time. When we teach letter names and the sounds associated with letters and letter pairs, it actually leads to better outcomes. Add in learning about the proper letter formation, and this can help to boost your child's literacy development. We can't forget that writing is a key component of literacy instruction and literacy development and language. We want for children to be able to automatically and accurately match letters to their corresponding sounds, both when they're reading and writing. You may also be wondering at this point, how do you know what alphabetic knowledge your child may have at this time? If you're going to spend some time working with them specifically on set letter names and sounds associated with letters or letter pairs, then this might be really helpful just so you have a snapshot on what you want to focus your time and energy on when you are working with your kiddo at home. So this can be done with magnetic letters. You can use post-it notes. You can use paper that you've cut up into strips and written letters on, making sure that each card has an individual letter or letter pair on it. And then you are simply going to sit your kiddo down and you're going to show them the card. So these, the ones that I have today to show you if you are watching the video, they are just from a Go Fish game. And so as you can see, it just has the grapheme on the card. There's no image to tell the child or give the child hints as to what the grapheme might be used for or beginning sound of. And what I would do is I would hold up the card and I would ask them to tell me the letter name and the sound that the letter spells. If they are able to tell you both of those pieces of information, I would put them in one pile. If they aren't able to tell you that information yet, I would put them in another pile. And so you just go through until you have two piles, which tells you the ones that you don't need to work on because your child has an understanding of the letter name and the sounds associated with it. And then you're going to have the pile of ones that you want to work on with them, whether they didn't know the letter names and sounds commonly associated with it. They knew the name, but not the sound but not the name. It doesn't really matter. It's just that they don't have all that key information yet. So that is going to be your pile and your focus for alphabetic knowledge and what you want to work on with your kiddo. And so I'm also going to attach in the show notes a scope and sequence for the UFly Foundations program, which is a phonics program, which builds on the alphabetic knowledge, but it just kind of gives you that scope and sequence, showing you, again, when we talked about structured literacy being that we work on simple concepts and go up to more complex concepts, that if you're wondering what should my child know at the very beginning of this learning journey, what are we going to work on? It starts with the most common letters or graphemes and sounds that are most commonly seen when we are reading and writing, and works up to ones that are less frequently seen or used. So it just gives you that nice little snapshot picture of how you might want to start focusing on just simple single letters of the alphabet, short vowel sounds, and then building up from there to be more letter pairs or vowel teams and sounds that we don't always commonly see as frequently. You pick one or two of those that you're going to focus on. You don't want to have your child trying to learn 16 different letter names and sounds all at once. We want for them to focus on ones that are going to be most commonly seen and used, and then move on once they have that knowledge. You also don't want to focus on letters that have similar forms. So I'm not going to work on the letter N and M at the same time because they are so similar in their printed form that it can be confusing. So I would try to pick ones that don't look similar so that it helps the child pick out those letters in and out of sequence, as well as focus on the letter names. A few more recommendations that I have for you today is one, make sure you consider the proper phonemes that are going to be associated with graphemes that you are teaching your child. I have put a video into the show notes, which I think is worth checking out. I think it's about 4 minutes long and it talks about blendable sounds. The purpose of this video is a nice little refresher for how do we make sure that we are saying the sound accurately so that we're not adding an sound to the end of the phoneme that doesn't belong there. So for example, with the letter B, B spells B, but we often go B. Or when we talk about the letter T, and T is spelt by the letter T, we often go T or K, but we don't want to have that sound. And so something that I often encourage kiddos to do, and admittedly, sometimes they remind me, is we need to clip the sound to make sure that we're not adding anything onto it, because it makes it hard when we are trying to decode if we're adding an additional sound on that doesn't exist or isn't a part of the actual sound that we're trying to articulate. So it's worth checking out. It's a nice little refresher. It is something that I continue to work on because it's something that I didn't learn in teachers college, to be honest. And so it is just a really valuable information, and it is really helpful for our kiddos to know as well. A second recommendation that I would like to share today is consider talking about how do you articulate specific phonemes that you are focusing on. This can be done very quickly, but what you want to ask your child is, how do I make a specific sound? And what they are going to tell you is what's happening with their teeth, their lips, their tongue. Do they notice air coming out of their mouth when they make a certain sound? Or is there something happening with their nose when they make a certain sound? They're just really having to attend to what is happening for them to create a specific sound that you're working on. I have found that this is helpful when you're working with sounds that are similar, or if your child is confusing two sounds. So for example, my son often will make the sound when he sees a TH, which is actually a. And so what happens is we often talk about or compare what does do with our mouth versus, because they're very different. And then he begins to make the association that when he sees those specific graphemes, he knows which sound he needs to make, but also how to properly articulate and make the sound independently. So it's just something to add into the mix. If you're wanting to try it, your kiddo can look at your mouth, which they might find kind of funny as you make the sound. You might have them FaceTime and tell a family member how to properly make the sound, or check the mirror. Just make it fun, make it quick. You might notice that at first they are going to just show you the sound. If you were working on the grapheme S and the sound is S, they might just show you S when you say, how do you make it? But have them explain, what is your mouth doing? What are your teeth doing? What is your tongue doing? And they will be able to describe it in more detail the more you do this task with them. For the last couple minutes of the episode, I feel like we have covered a lot of ground today. I would like to just share a few other activities or options for how you can support the development of your child's alphabetic knowledge at home. One way I always like to support this is through read alouds together. What you can be doing is, as you read, if you have been working on a specific grapheme and phoneme pair, you might say, on this page, where is the letter T? Or the grapheme T, and they can find it. Or you might say, oh, on this page, I noticed that there is a grapheme that spells the sound can you point to that grapheme for me? It doesn't have to be a long, drawn out activity. It can just be something that you point out here or there. In the grocery store, you might do that. While you're driving, you can do that. You can also start to give them words, and you can say, what is the beginning sound that you hear, and what letter do we use to spell that sound? Just pulling it all together in short little bursts so that they're getting the repetition and opportunity to practice pulling all of that information together so that they learn letter names and sounds associated with specific letter and letter pairs. Other fun games where you can practice letter sounds and letter name building knowledge is through games like bingo or go fish or memory if you have those games at home. If you don't have specific decks at home, I don't think you have to go out and buy them. You can always just make them yourself on paper really quickly, but play fun little games like that where they have to point out to you the letter name and the sound that that letter spells as part of the game, whatever game it is you may be creating or playing. And lastly, I really want to encourage you to have your child practice writing. Writing is going to deepen their learning and understanding, and writing is a key piece of literacy instruction that we need for our children to become proficient in. So whether they draw a picture for you and they start to label the picture, being that they give you one letter for the beginning sound, or they're working on writing simple sentences depending on what grade they're in. Get them to do as much writing as they can. They might do what we call as invented spelling, where they're working through and giving you just the letters associated with the sounds they hear as they break down the word. That is okay. This is a skill that we want for them to develop. Once they've spelt the word for you, if it's incorrect, then you can show them how to properly spell it and walk them through the different phonemes that are in the word to create the word. But don't leave it so that they're just thinking that their spelling is correct, but we don't want for them to always be copying. We want for them to start to use the skills independently to build on that knowledge that you are giving them as you start to give them more letter names and sounds associated with the letters and letter pairs. I think the best part about this is that we can integrate these activities into our day-to-day life. They don't have to be prepped out. You do not need to have Pinterest-worthy activities at home to teach your child alphabetic knowledge and have that understanding. It's very simple and can be done quick pace throughout your day in short little bursts. To keep things simple today, I'm going to put a free resource in the show notes. It is a letter formation principle. What you can do is print this for your child and they can practice their printing skills for lowercase letters as well as uppercase letters. So something quick and easy that you can print for them to complete if you're looking to see how they are doing and to practice that fine motor component as well. So super simple. Again, this will be in the show notes. If you just click down there, you'll be able to find access to this resource to print. The final thing I'm going to leave you with today, of course, is a picture book recommendation. The picture book I have picked today is one that my son has really enjoyed listening to over and over again. I have put in the show notes a link to Good Mind, which is a First Nations family-owned business where they share wonderful books and Indigenous education resources. So it's worth checking out if you're looking to get this book. But the book that I am sharing today is The Raven and the Loon, and it is written by Rachel and Sean Kitswalik Tinsley, and it is illustrated by Kim Smith. And so it is the Inuit legend of how did the loon and the raven get their beautiful coloring and their coats. So again, worth checking out. The illustrations are beautiful. The story is one that my son and I have really enjoyed. So it's worth checking out if you're looking for a new book to add to your list. Thank you to our wonderful listeners, the LIT team, for tuning in to the Lit Mom podcast. For our fourth episode, we will discuss phonological awareness and phonemic awareness and how you can support this foundational skill at home. I hope that today's episode was informational and inspiring. Remember that every moment is an opportunity to support your child's learning journey. Until next time, keep reading, keep learning, keep growing. I'm your host, Dev, bringing literacy tips and tricks straight to your headphones.